My friends, what is crack-a-lackin'? So we are back at it with the Daily Dose. We are still in the book of First Kings. We're going to be looking at chapters 11 through 13 today, as well as Psalm number 97. So strap on your seatbelt, grab a drink, and let's hit the road. We open up today looking at Solomon's wives. This is wild. This is straight up wild, okay? Solomon apparently had hungry eyes for women and for exotic women. We read that he was interested in all sorts of the different females in the various tribes of the land, of the Canaanites, the people that God said that they were not supposed to be intermarrying with, right? We read that Solomon did just that. He had 700 wives. 700! And he had 300 concubines. That comes out to be about 1,000 women, give or take, right? If he was to spend, roughly, and I'm kind of rounding numbers here, but if he was to spend one day with each one of his wives and or concubines, it would take him 1,000 days to spend one day with every single one of them. That's pushing 3 years. Can you imagine if your husband only came and spent a day with you like once every 3 years? I'm sure he had some that were his favorites or whatever, and maybe they got to see him more often, but you get my point. That is a massive number. Many of them, and I mentioned this before, many of the women were from the people of the land, the people of Canaan, of whom God told Israel not to intermarry with. We also read that, and this is, I think, one of the root reasons that God probably gave that commandment to not intermarry. I believe that God knew that the Israelites would be lured away to the false gods of the people of the land, right? You know, happy wife, happy life is a popular catchphrase nowadays. And we read that if you want to have a happy marriage, just do whatever you got to do to make sure your wife's happy, right? I'm not saying that's biblical. I'm just saying that's kind of the common catchphrase today, right? But I would imagine that it was probably a catchphrase back then too. Can you imagine how hard it would have been for Solomon to make 1,000 women happy? Just being real. It couldn't have been easy. But apparently he tried. And one of the ways he tried was to build altars and high places of worship where sacrifices could be made and worshiping could be done to foreign gods. He did this to appease his foreign wives. So you've got the real true God, you've got the temple, you've got the Ark of the Covenant, but now you've got Solomon going off into these various places and building altars to worship false gods. Like, Solomon, what are you thinking, bro? What are you thinking? But obviously he had women was his weakness, or at least one of his weaknesses. He had a weakness for women and to do whatever he had to do to please them and make them happy, I guess. So from there we go on to read about Solomon's adversaries. Okay, so after these altars get built in the high places to foreign gods, problems arise. We read that God raised up this dude named Hadad, who was an Edomite. So back in the day, David and his general, his commander Joab, they had gone to battle with Edom, with the Edomites. They apparently killed most of them. However, this guy Hadad had fled to Egypt. He ended up becoming a trusted friend to the Pharaoh at the time. After he learned that David and Joab had both passed away, we read that he left to go back to his old home. And then we read a similar story about a dude named Rezon, or maybe it's pronounced Razon. I'm not sure on that one. So after that section about Solomon's adversaries, we read that Jeroboam rebels against Solomon. Okay, so Solomon had put Jeroboam in charge of his workforce. A prophet comes along, tells Jeroboam that God will give him 10 tribes to rule over. Solomon finds out and tries to kill Jeroboam, but fails. Then we read about Solomon's death. Okay, so Solomon, his time comes, he dies. Rehoboam, Solomon's son, ends up succeeding him as king. So we've got Jeroboam and Rehoboam. So Solomon had put Jeroboam in charge of his workforce. Rehoboam was Solomon's son. Okay, so Rehoboam ends up becoming king. And then we read about Israel pretty much rebelling against this guy, Rehoboam. And here's what happens. So Jeroboam and the people complained that Solomon taxed them too much, that the taxes were too heavy, that it was a heavy yoke. And they were like, yo, Rehoboam, look, don't be so heavy-handed with us like your father was. Don't tax us so much. It's not necessary, and we'd appreciate it if you loosened up a little bit on the taxes, basically. So they asked Rehoboam to consider this. So Rehoboam says, okay, well, I'm going to ask some people what they think I should do. I'm new at all this. I'm a new king. I'm going to go talk to some of the older, wise men, the elders, and see what they say. The elders said, hey, that's a great idea. You should probably do this. You should do what the people ask, loosen up on the taxes and earn their trust and their favor. So then Rehoboam goes to ask some of his childhood friends he had grown up with. He's like, hey, what should I do? Here's what happened. The people want me to ease up on them. And, what do you think I should do? So his younger, less wise friends said, hey, you know what? If that's the way they want to play, then you should come down even harder on them. You should be 10 times worse than Solomon, basically. And he takes their counsel. He basically says, look, if you think my dad was bad, wait till you get a load of me. Okay, so Israel gets upset, and they basically leave. They pretty much refuse to recognize him as king, except for Judah, and we come to find out Benjamin. So out of the 12 tribes, it appears there's only 2 that are willing to put up with Rehoboam, and that leaves 10 other tribes, which is interesting because we read a little while back that the prophet told Jeroboam that God was going to give him 10 tribes to rule over. So let's see how this plays out. So after that section about Israel rejecting or rebelling in large against Rehoboam, we read about some golden calves at Bethel and Dan. So Jeroboam is afraid that when the people go back to Jerusalem to sacrifice, and so he's talking about the 10 tribes that, the 10 tribes that had come back and rejected Rehoboam. They were kind of under Jeroboam now, right? So Jeroboam is afraid that when these people of the 10 tribes go back to Jerusalem to sacrifice, he's concerned that Rehoboam will end up winning the people back. He'll find a way to get in their good graces. And if he does that, then Jeroboam might lose his power, over these people. So Jeroboam says, okay, well, here's the deal. I'll build some golden calves that the people can go sacrifice to so that they don't have to go back to the temple where God prescribed that the sacrifices had to be done. So he does that. He appoints non-Levitical priests to be stationed at these golden calves. And this is not a good thing. The next section we read about is a man of God from Judah. So Rehoboam prepares to attack Israel. He's like, you know what? Y'all are going to respect me or else that's it. So Rehoboam gets ready to go and attack, and we read that a prophet tells him to stand down. Well, thankfully, Rehoboam listens to this prophet, and he goes back home. And that's kind of where we wrap up the scripture for today. So I will let you guys think about that. I encourage you to dig in, read it for yourself. Don't forget to go check out Psalm 97, and just have a good day. See who you can encourage today. See who you can speak a word of love into today. And until we meet again, friends, deuces.